Let's Zena. Today we are going to talk about the history of England. Now, in our recent videos, we talked about Scotland, and today we're going to talk about the history of England itself. Now, England is one of the main attractions in the world, and it is also the main language, or the second language that is taught in the world. Yes, and it's because a lot of people in the world speak English because of England itself, and all of its colonies that we're going to get into later of this video. And let's get started. After England declared itself as a kingdom and a country, the Romans attacked it and they conquered it. And later they fortified a wall in the northern border so that they could keep the Scottish out. But this also turned out a bad idea because the Scottish rebelled, destroyed parts of the wall, and entered into Britain, and entered into England, and took away back what they lost. Yay for Scotland and England! And no, because later there was the 100 Years' War. Now, I did a separate video on this in another video in another series that I call the Hands on History series. So type in my YouTube channel's name and put in Hands on History to check that out. Alright, let's get moving on. The 100 Years' War is a disaster because first England and Scotland wanted to be friends, but then later they declined. England was fighting against the French during this time, and the Scottish hated this Edward guy, so the Scottish decided to make an alliance with France. But this also went for a kind of breakdown because the English found out about this message and declared themselves kings of Scotland. And later a knight guy stopped this, and that knight guy was executed after saying, "Freedom!" Yes, this is kind of getting, yes. And yes, this is getting a lot of crazier than I thought it would be. Anyways, later, the Angles settled in the English. Now, as I said earlier in another video, I said that England means land of the Angles. And a lot of people even did this. And there was a lot of legends, such as King Arthur, a British king who pulled a sword that he can only pull out of anything, called Excalibur. Now, there are debates of if the Excalibur sword is real, and there are no archaeological evidence of Excalibur. We made it ourselves in artifacts and made it look very old and made it into a museum and put it into museums in England. But it isn't true. And the English got 99% close to controlling all of Scotland. And later, after Queen Elizabeth I died, her cousin James I got into her funeral, and he became the King of England, King of Scotland, and King of Ireland, just in a day. And I know what he might say of best funeral ever. But since Elizabeth I died, he'd say, so funeral ever. Enough of jokes. Alright, next we're gonna get into the empires of the English. Now, the English got a lot of colonies. I talked about them in a separate videos in my Hands on History series. Check them out if you haven't yet. Now, the English got a lot of empires. They colonized from the United States of America all the way to Australia. But then later these empires collapsed, and since then, those native people started talking English. United States, there's some of them were even the United States of America, Australia, India, no, not China. Yes, all those stuff. And the ones I just said were one of the most important ones for them. And I just hope that you just understood it, and that, well, we're going to talk about this in our next video. And also, England is where the Industrial Revolution even started. I made a separate video on the Industrial Revolution, also on the Hands on History series. Check that out if you haven't yet. And moving on, the steam engine was in the Industrial Revolution, and a man named James Watt himself, no, not a Scottish accent, please, made the first successful steam engine, and he became fabulously rich. And then later he became part of the history of England. And even after the empires of England, and even after the Industrial Revolution, a lot of things happened, and all of the population of the world started talking English. And I am a Korean myself, and I am speaking English. And well, I'm a full Korean, and my mom is Korean, my dad is Korean, full Koreans, my grandma is full Korean, my grandpa is full Korean, and yes, even my father's grandpa and grandmother's side is full Korean. And well, I hope that kind of gets into you, and I hope I won't. I hope I'll marry a Korean when I get older, full Korean. And I'll see you next time. Shunhan out. Bam 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 bam.